He is a partner at DeCello Levitt, who is one of the attorneys that is representing the 5 John Does, the ex-WWF Ring Boys. Greg Gutzler joins us here on the program. Greg, thank you very much for making time for us today to come on and explain this case for people that maybe have not been able to go through the 82 pages or are semi-aware of the Ring Boy scandal. I'll start with sort of when this case came to your attention across your desk and learning of this, and kind of give us a time period of how long this lead up was to Wednesday's filing.
Right. Well, thank you, and nice to meet you. So we've been investigating this for months. We were approached by several Ring Boys who I think felt empowered by a shift in the culture of our country, as well as, most importantly, the recent revelations regarding Vince and the culture of corruption at the WWE. We detail this in our complaint, where we talk about the myriad allegations against Vince, the hush payments that were made, how that was investigated with respect to TKO and WWE, and what was going on at the company. So we've been investigating it for months. And if you look at sexual abuse, what you see is that most sexual abuse goes unreported entirely. And then if you look at the small percentage of sexual abuse that is reported, you often have years and years of what they call delayed disclosure. And that's because of the cultural barriers, the fear and the shame, and the intimidation of companies like WWE. And so why is it coming up now? It's coming up now because they finally felt as though it was a safe place where they could come forward, because Vince is at least ostensibly no longer in power. And they think that with the new ownership, perhaps there will be, with the regime change, hopefully a new philosophy of recognizing what went wrong in the past, acknowledging it, and making it right.
And thanks for joining us, Greg. I wanted to point out too that some people might point out that, well, look, these abuses are alleged to have happened in the 80s. It's now 2024. Is there a statute of limitations that would null a lawsuit like this? But I understand. Let me know if I'm getting this right. The Child Victims Act of 2023 in Maryland basically removes the statute of limitations when it comes to sex abuse, even in the case of negligence, which is what's being alleged against the defendants here. Am I right about that?
That is correct. And we are in Maryland, where each of our John Does was in fact abused on multiple occasions. And that is correct. And what the Maryland legislature did is they recognized the science and the psychology that goes into trauma victims having delayed disclosure. So that's why the Maryland CVA, the Child Victims Act, is how it is. There it is. And it does recognize what these young men and young women will go through. In our case, we have 5 John Doe Ring Boys, and we're already being contacted by more people.
I find it interesting that, you do have the 5 John Does. Was this a progression? Was this a group effort in terms of them coming forward together? Because I think you look at cases like this, there is a certain strength in numbers. And for these 5, I'm kind of just curious of like their ability to come forward these years later, if they were somewhat in concert with one another about seeing this common cause and now being the time.
Yeah. So first of all, it's a great question. They were not in concert with one another. We've been doing our investigation, so they are separate. They are not in concert whatsoever. We brought them in one case because, yes, there's strength in numbers in terms of being able to withstand what will be the inevitable besmirchment of their reputation, just attacking them in every way, using the machinery. And it's happened in the past how the WWE has treated survivors of any type of abuse, not just sexual, but it could be employment issues. There's been a lot of cases here. So they were cognizant of the issues, especially with the recent developments in which people have come forward. And Janelle Grant was probably the lightning rod for really opening up the fact that they could come forward and tell their truth. So over the last few months, with the revelations of Janelle Grant, the hush money payments, Vince being removed, and really finding out more and more what Vince and Linda knew, their involvement in knowing about the Ring Boys, at least as early as the early 1980s. So you have now revelations where when you think about how you look at life or how you look at a lawsuit, you really do put pieces together. And sometimes it takes a while to say, oh my goodness, I now realize what has occurred and what did occur and how it occurred and who was involved. And so it is most certainly going to be a gradual progression of knowledge of fortifying your knowledge of the position and what really happened. And that really occurred here in the last few months when you saw more of the reporting on Janelle Grant and the other hush payments by Vince McMahon.
And Greg, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to the comment that we got from Jessica Rosenberg, who's the attorney for Vince McMahon. She gave us a comment yesterday where she went after Phil Mushnick, who people will know is a New York Post columnist who had been, going back to 1992, has been reporting on things, including the Ring Boy scandal. And she said more than 30 years ago, the columnist Phil Mushnick tried to make headlines with these same false claims. Those allegations were never proven and ultimately became the subject of a defamation lawsuit against Mr. Mushnick. The negligence claims against Mr. McMahon that were asserted today, which is yesterday, rely on the same absurd, defamatory, and utterly meritless statements by Mr. Mushnick. We will vigorously defend Mr. McMahon and are confident the court will find that these claims are untrue and unfounded. So just your thoughts in response to that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. She's a great lawyer at one of the best law firms in the world, and she's doing her job for a very powerful, very wealthy client. And I understand she has to take that position on behalf of her client. But if you read the 81-page complaint, you are going to see multiple facts, myriad facts, dozens of facts that have nothing to do with Phil Mushnick. So what do we have? We have the fact that you had Mel Philips shuttling young boys in plain sight in front of WWE executives and wrestlers from state to state. You have him in plain sight staying in hotel rooms with young boys. You have in plain sight Mel Philips engaging in sexual foot fetishes in the ring in front of people, in the locker room in front of wrestlers and executives. He was even provided his own private dressing room in certain areas. You have the FBI videotape where the FBI said, the behavioral science unit said, this is consistent with pedophilia and sexual foot fetishes. You have Vince McMahon never denying that he told people that Mel Philips had a peculiar and unnatural interest in young boys. You have the fact that Vince and Linda McMahon fired Mel Philips in 1988 for engaging in the improper activities with young boys and hired him back with the caveat of steer clear of the kids, the clear acknowledgement that they knew that Mel Philips engaged in improper activities with young boys. It was there in plain sight. And anybody who has a child or anybody with a moral compass would recognize when you put all of these facts together, you've got a major problem. And this person should not be hanging around young boys, certainly with the aura and the power of being affiliated with the WWE in a public-facing role as the ring announcer. So when you look at all of these things, this has very little to do or nothing to do with Phil Mushnick. And I should note that the defamation lawsuit, Truth is a Defense, and Phil Mushnick and the New York Post paid $0 to the WWE. They walked away from that case because what they knew is that Mushnick told the truth, and there was ample other evidence outside of what Mushnick reported that showed this is absolutely true. And the WWE and Vince and Linda McMahon knew it. And you also have the testimony of at least a dozen wrestlers and executives that talked about seeing it in plain sight and telling Vince McMahon. And he said, I'll take care of it. So you've got a lot of facts, but I do appreciate counsel, who's one of the greatest attorneys around, no doubt. But she's doing her job, and I respect that. And I appreciate the fact that she had a comment. It's just off the mark. It misses all the evidence in the complaint. It's just not right.
And it's striking looking at what the FBI was looking into in 1993. It sounds like they were coming close to bringing charges against Mel Philips, who has now passed away. Did the FBI drop the ball here and not bringing him to trial for sex abuse?
That's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. My understanding, and I don't know if this is right. My understanding is that they decided to forego the sexual abuse charges against Mel and try to flip him to go after Vince and the WWE on the steroid charges. So I think that they made a decision. I don't have definitive evidence of that, but I have heard that. And it does make a bit of sense. There's also the possibility that some of the victims were too afraid to come forward. And that harkens back to the point about the statute of limitations and the Maryland Child Victims Act. It goes to the issue of it's really hard to disclose sexual abuse, especially as a young boy against a very, very powerful corporation, powerful people who have a ruthless grip on power. And you could see how they ran the company. Very sharp elbows.
Greg, given your own history, one of the aspects to a case like this is being able to take what is a very dark story, and sometimes you can get really deep into details, and how you can illustrate this to a public to fully understand what is the core of this story. And sometimes it is a name and a face being attached to this. I think that was part of the reason the Janelle Grant case had such resonance with people, was just this was not just a idea. This was a woman that has been victimized. In the case of this one, going through these 82 pages, it's supported by photos, which I found to be very powerful. Like sometimes, 82 pages, it's a lot for people to digest. There's some horrific language, but sometimes just first of all, the decision to include the photos, I think it sort of brings it to just your average reader that this is real life and these are real people. And sometimes it's very powerful just to have these images attached to a case.
Absolutely. I think that the public at large sometimes likes to ignore sexual abuse because, quite frankly, it's really painful. It's painful to think that you could have a child or a parent or a sibling that may have been subjected to these types of things. And you see the photos there. These are children. They were impressionable, vulnerable children who saw the WWF back in the day as their dream playing out in reality. Heel versus babyface, babyface versus heel, good versus bad, America versus other countries. And they really did the morality arc, and they really knew how to play that story arc. And so you look at the pictures and it brings it home. These are real people. And it's easy in a vacuum, if you just see a name John Doe, to assign some motive to that person and say, well, they're doing it for this reason or that reason. The reason we're here is they want the truth to be told. They want to be a beacon of hope for people in the future and to stand up for other people who have been hurt. And that's the truth. And when you get to know these people, you will say, these are people whose lives were ruined. We need to take this seriously. And we hope the WWE will also.
Yeah. And as we know, Vince is being investigated by the federal government, according to a report in February regarding sex trafficking and sexual assault allegations. We've, figured that that's probably related to allegations that various women have made against him personally of sexual assault and sex trafficking. But is there a possibility, and I think about this in the context of Janelle Grant making her petition to Dr. Kolker and the mention of RICO charges here. I wonder if is it possible that RICO could be a part of what even the federal government is looking at concerning criminal charges? I don't know if that would bring you to speculate, but just your thoughts on that.
Well, I would be speculating based on this particular fact pattern, but generally speaking, when you have two or more acts like this, predicate acts, you may have wire fraud, money laundering, things of that nature, other crimes. The government often brings RICO charges, and that's what is very, very prevalent in these cases. I certainly don't know exactly what the federal government is investigating. We could speculate, but I don't know. But you will often see RICO charges as a part of this type of enterprise where there are multiple acts, illegal acts.
Has there been any? It's only a day removed from the suit being filed. Has there been any outreach from TKO or WWE at this point yet? Has there been any type of response?
Right. So I can't answer that more than just saying that you read a statement, Brandon, and that's been in the public. That's what I can say.
And that's just from the McMahon side. We've reached out to W and TKO. We've not gotten a response as of yet.
Understood. So that's how I can answer that question.
Again, knowing that this is just the day removed, have you had a chance to speak to any of the John Does and just where they are at after this suit has been filed? Like, obviously, this is a long road to be able to come forth with these allegations and being able to see this suit see the light of day, and sort of, I imagine, both maybe a relief, but also very re-traumatizing to endure what is decades old incidents that occurred to each of the five.
Well, you asked the question exactly correctly. I won't talk about communications I've had with them that may be of a legally privileged nature, but I can tell you that this has been a really painful journey. And in some ways, stepping forward and having their truth be heard was empowering. It was also incredibly re-traumatizing, incredibly painful, and it really does bring to the forefront the things that happened to them and how it's affected their lives. So it's really a complex issue when you have sexual abuse survivors. And whether it happened yesterday or 50 years ago, there are very deep wounds and scars that never heal. And they're going through that right now. So I did check in with each of them. And my heart really goes out to them. They're really good people who've been really hurt. And I'm hoping to represent them the best that I can.
We'll let you go in just a second, Greg. You've been very generous with your time. What are we looking at in terms of like the next steps that we should be watching for after the complaint is filed? Can you give us any type of a roadmap to the best of your estimation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And you're going to hear the "it depends." And I'm sorry, but that's the way it goes. You could see a variety of different things that happen. I actually couldn't give you a roadmap. I could give you about 17 different permutations, which I think will be very boring and very legalese. So there are many permutations, many different paths. We don't know what's going to happen. So I really can't answer your question any better than it depends on a lot of different things. But I can tell you that we have had other victims come forward, other witnesses come forward. And what you see in these cases is you will see the floodgates open where people who have knowledge, who have been sitting back, who are also afraid, even if they're not victims, they're going to come forward with their truth, with their pictures, their documents, their emails. And that's how these things come together, because the truth comes out and people want to get on the side of doing the right thing for the most part.
And just one final question is, as people are coming forward, like we've certainly seen this in the case of Vince McMahon, like this history of non-disclosure agreements, is that an area you're actively navigating that this would extend to potential victims as well in the Ring Boy scandal?
So we're not aware of any NDAs with Ring Boys. And in fact, because they were underage, they could not have in fact entered into an enforceable contract, nor were they asked to, because they were shuttled around so much by Mel Philips. But so no, we don't see NDAs with respect to our plaintiffs being an issue, but there certainly could be fact witnesses, executives that have knowledge as to what was going on, who will try to hide behind an NDA to not tell the truth.
All right. Well, Greg, we will park it there. I really appreciate you joining us. I hope we can continue this dialogue at a later date. And, you know, we appreciate you coming on to kind of break down this case. It's extremely important, and I think a lot of people will appreciate your insight into the entire lead up to this and where this goes next.
Thank you. I appreciate you looking into it and having me on today. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg.